I stood under the stage lights clutching my bouquet when he leaned into the microphone and said the words that made the room go dead silent. Then the cheering started. It was not his friends but his parents, loud and rehearsed. I did not cry. I looked at the front row where his family smiled like they had just won a lawsuit. That was when I knew they had just signed the biggest mistake of their lives. My name is Isser Asheton, and at 34 years old, I was standing on a stage that felt less like a wedding altar and more like a sacrificial slab. The venue was a converted theater in downtown Nashville, a cavernous space where the air conditioning was set low enough to preserve meat. Above me, massive LED screens projected my face in high definition to 500 guests and an unknown number of live stream viewers. The sheer scale of it was ridiculous. This was not a ceremony. It was a production, and as I would soon find out, I was not the bride. I was the prop. The organ music swelled, a thunderous artificial sound that vibrated through the floorboards and up into the soles of my heels. I walked toward Beckett Rowe. He stood at the center of the stage, framed by an arch of white roses that had cost $4,000. He looked devastatingly handsome in his bespoke tuxedo, the kind of handsome that usually made my chest ache with a mixture of pride and anxiety. Today, however, the anxiety was winning. I scanned the front row, the family seating, usually at this point in a wedding. The mother of the groom is dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Evelyn Rowe was not crying. She was sitting with her spine rigid against the velvet chair, her hands folded in her lap, staring at me with the blank, predatory patience of a shark waiting for a seal to slip off the ice beside her. Gordon Rowe checked his watch. He did not look like a father watching his son get married. He looked like a CEO waiting for a board meeting to commence. They were too calm. That was the first thing that hit me. The air around them was static, charged with a secret they were struggling to keep contained. I reached the altar. Beckett took my hands. His palms were dry. Usually he sweated when he was nervous. Today he was as cool as the marble floor. He did not smile at me. He looked past my shoulder toward the cameras positioned at the back of the room. Then he did something that was not in the rehearsal script. He reached over and took the microphone from the officiant. The officiant, a confused man named Reverend Miller, stepped back, looking unsure if this was part of the modern vows we had discussed. It was not. The feedback from the microphone waited for a split second, a sharp screech that made the audience flinch. Beckett held up a hand, a gesture practiced in 100 boardroom presentations. "I am sorry," Beckett said. His voice was smooth, pitched perfectly for the audio equipment. It was his serious voice, the one he used when he was delivering bad news about quarterly projections. "I cannot do this." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a physical weight pressing down on the room. 500 people held their breaths simultaneously. "Isser," he said, turning to me though he was still playing to the cameras, "I have tried to make this work. I wanted to believe that we shared the same values. But the truth needs to be respected. And the truth is I cannot marry someone who does not understand the meaning of integrity." He let the word integrity hang there floating in the cold air. I stared at him. I did not blink. I did not gasp. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my face remained stone. I had spent 4 years navigating the minefield of his family, and I had learned one thing above all else. Never let them see you bleed. "The wedding is off," Beckett declared, his voice firm, final. And then the impossible happened. Evelyn Rose stood up. She did not rush forward to comfort her son. She did not cover her mouth in shock. She stood up and she clapped. It was a sharp, rhythmic applause, loud and violent in the silent hall. "Yes," she shouted. "Yes." Beckett finally. Gordon Rose stood up beside her. He was grinning, a wide, toothy grin that looked grotesque on his usually stoic face. He clapped his son on the back from a distance, raising a fist in the air. "That is my boy. That is leadership." A ripple of confusion went through the rest of the guests, but the front row, the Rowe family block, erupted. Cousins, aunts, business partners, they were cheering, they were high-fiving. The sound washed over me, a wave of humiliation designed to drown me right there on the stage. It sounded like the roar of a crowd at a wrestling match when the villain is finally body slammed. I stood frozen, but my eyes were darting, recording everything. I saw the guests in the middle rows whispering, phones raised, capturing the spectacle. I saw my own few friends in the back standing up in outrage, their faces masks of horror. But then I saw the detail that made everything click into place. Over by the side exit, two of the Row Meridian Labs assistants were moving. They were not rushing to help manage the chaos. They were calm. They were carrying stacks of glossy folders, press kits. I saw one assistant hand a folder to a journalist from the local business journal who had been invited to cover the social angle. They were handing out the story. They had printed the story before the wedding had even started. This was not a spontaneous realization of my lack of integrity. This was a scheduled product launch, and the product was my destruction. Beckett stepped closer to me. The camera drone buzzed overhead, capturing the intimate moment of the heartbroken groom confronting the unworthy bride. He leaned in, lowering the microphone just an inch, but he knew the acoustics of the room. He knew the live stream audio would pick up a whisper. "You," he hissed, his eyes hard and shiny like polished stones. "You will not get a single thing from my family. Not a dime, not a reputation. You are done." The words hit me, but they did not hurt. Instead, they acted like a bucket of ice water, shocking me into a state of hyperlarity. He was talking about the assets. He was talking about the prenuptial agreement. He was talking about the company's shares. He thought I was devastated. He thought I was going to collapse, to weep, to beg him to reconsider while the cameras rolled, giving him the perfect footage of the hysterical, money-hungry woman being cast aside by the principal tycoon. But his words confirmed the one thing I had suspected for 6 months. They were afraid. They were terrified of what I knew, and they were trying to nuke my credibility before I could ever open my mouth. The cheering from his parents was still going. Evelyn was actually laughing now, a shrill sound that cut through the murmur of the crowd. I looked at Beckett. I really looked at him. I saw the sweat finally beating on his upper lip. He was acting, but he was also adrenaline dumped. He was waiting for my reaction. He needed my reaction to sell the scene. I refused to give it to him. I took a slow breath. I reached down to my left hand. My fingers were cold but steady. I gripped the platinum band with the 3-carat diamond, a ring Evelyn had picked out because she said my taste was too pedestrian. I slid the ring off my finger. It came away easily. I did not throw it at him. I did not scream. I walked over to the plexiglass podium where the officiant had left his Bible. I placed the ring on the surface with a soft clink. It sat there glittering under the harsh stage lights, a piece of evidence at a crime scene. Then I turned my back on him. I heard Beckett inhale sharply. He had not expected silence. He wanted a fight. Silence was not in the script. I walked toward the wings of the stage. My dress, a heavy silk ball gown that cost $12,000, rustled around my legs. I kept my head high, my shoulders back. I could feel 500 pairs of eyes burning into my spine. I could feel the heat of the LED screens radiating against my neck. "Yes, sir," Beckett called out, his voice losing a fraction of its composure. "Walk away. That is all you know how to do." I did not stop. I did not look back. I stepped off the stage and into the shadows of the backstage corridor. The heavy velvet curtain swung shut behind me, dampening the sound of the chaos outside, but not blocking it out completely. I could still hear the murmur, the rising volume of gossip, the distinct cackle of Evelyn Rowe. The corridor was cool and dark. A production assistant was standing there holding a headset, staring at me with her mouth open. I walked past her without a word. I pushed open the door to the bridal suite and stepped inside. The room was filled with flowers. The scent of lilies so strong it was almost suffocating. My bouquet was still in my hand. I had not even realized I was gripping it so tight that the stems were snapping. I tossed the bouquet onto the vanity table. It landed next to a bottle of champagne that was meant for a toast that would never happen. I reached into the hidden pocket of my dress, a modification I had insisted on, despite the tailor telling me it would ruin the silhouette. I pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling now, just a little. Not from sadness, from the adrenaline of the kill. I unlocked the screen. The light was harsh in the dim room. I opened my encrypted messaging app. I found the contact named Rory. I typed one word. Now I hit send. I stared at the screen for a second, watching the message deliver. Then I sat down on the velvet ottoman in the center of the room. I could hear the noise through the wall. The cheering had stopped. replaced by the low roar of hundreds of people talking at once. They were feasting on the drama. I closed my eyes. I did not see the darkness. I saw a memory. I saw the first time I realized that for the Rowe family, people were just fuel for their ambition. I let the memory wash over me, replacing the sound of the present with the cold, hard lessons of the past. The stage was set. The press kits were out. Beckett thought he had dropped the curtain on me. He had no idea. He had just walked into the trap I had spent 4 years building. The cheering in the main hall had turned into a low buzzing hum vibrating through the wall of the bridal suite. I sat on the velvet ottoman, my hands folded in my lap, staring at the closed door. It was strange how clarity arrived not with a shout, but with the quiet click of a memory locking into place. I had spent 4 years thinking I was building a life with Beckett Rowe. Now sitting in the wreckage of that life, I realized I had not been a partner. I had been a contractor, hired to build a pedestal for a statue that was hollow on the inside. It started 4 years ago at the Crestline Civic Studio, Fall Garler. I was 30 years old then, working as the director of development. My job was to beg for money without looking like I was begging. I organized the events, secured the sponsorships, and wrote the speeches that made rich people feel generous for buying tax-deductible tables. Beckett was the keynote speaker. He was 32, the founder of Roro Meridian Labs, a biotech startup that had just secured its series of funding. I remember watching him from the side of the stage. He was charismatic, leaning over the podium, talking about ethical innovation and building a legacy for the next generation. He had the kind of hair that looked perfect without trying, and a smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room who understood the joke. He found me at the bar afterward. I was exhausted, nursing a glass of cheap Chardonnay, trying to calculate if we had met our fundraising goal. "You wrote the intro speech for the director?" he said. It was not a question. Was it that obvious? I asked. It was too smart for him, Beckett said, flashing that smile. He skipped the best lines. I wanted to meet the person who actually wrote them. We talked for 3 hours. He told me about his lab, about how hard it was to manage the business side when all he wanted to do was science. He seemed vulnerable. He seemed like a visionary who just needed someone to help him organize his brilliance. I fell for it. I fell for the potential of him. Within 6 months, I was doing a second full-time job for free. I spent my evenings at his loft, rewriting his pitch decks because his original drafts were dry and technical. I softened the language. I crafted the Rowe Meridian mission statement that eventually got printed on the lobby wall of his office. I designed the partnership strategy that landed him his first government contract. "You are a lifesaver," he would say, kissing my forehead as I typed away on his laptop at 2 in the morning. "I do not know what I would do without you helping me out a little bit." Helping out a little bit. That was the phrase. It was always minimized. I was the girlfriend helping out, not the consultant saving his company thousands of dollars in strategy fees. Then came the introduction to the family. Beckett drove me to Franklin, Tennessee, to the Rowe estate. It was a sprawling colonial house set back from the road, surrounded by fences that cost more than my car. I was nervous. I had worn my best dress, a navy sheath from a department store that I thought looked professional and elegant. Evelyn Rowe met us at the door. She was a small woman with hair so stiff it could withstand a hurricane and eyes that scanned me like a barcode reader. She did not hug me. She extended a hand that felt like a bundle of dry twigs. "So this is Isser," she said. She looked down at my shoes, then up to my neckline. "You are very cute. That dress is charming. It looks very durable." "Thank you," I said, ignoring the tone. We sat in the living room, which felt more like a museum than a home. Gordon Rowe, Beckett's father, sat in a leather wing-back chair, reading a newspaper. He barely looked up. "Beckett says you work for a nonprofit," Evelyn said, stirring her tea. "Yes, at Crestline Civic Studio. I manage corporate partnerships." "Civic Studio?" she repeated, tasting the words as if they were sour milk. "That is nice. A nice hobby. But tell me, Dio, what does your family do for money?" "Real money?" The question was so blunt, it took the air out of my lungs. "My father was a high school history teacher," I said, keeping my voice steady. And my mother managed a bakery before she passed away. Evelyn blinked. Oh, how quaint. Service industry. She looked at Beckett, and the look said everything. She is not one of us. That dinner set the pattern for the next 3 years. Every Sunday we drove to Franklin. We sat at the long mahogany table. Gordon would ask Beckett about the business. Beckett would launch into a monologue about a new deal or a media appearance. I have been thinking about pivoting the marketing strategy, Beckett would say, reciting the exact points I had written for him over coffee that morning. Brilliant, Gordon would say. That is sharp thinking, son. If I tried to add a detail or clarify a point, Beckett would place his hand over mine. It looked affectionate, but the pressure was firm. A silence command. Isser has some ideas, too, he would say, smiling at his parents. She likes the creative trifles, colors, and fonts. You know how women are with the aesthetics. Creative trifles. I sat there chewing my roast beef, swallowing the indignation. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself that Beckett needed to shine in front of his father, that he was insecure and needed my support. I was the strong one. I could take the eraser because I knew the truth. But as the wedding approached, the dynamic shifted from dismissive to predatory. Rome Meridian Labs was facing a public relations slump. There had been rumors about a failed trial, and the stock value of their private holding was wobbling. They needed a distraction. They needed a feel-good story. A wedding is perfect, Evelyn had said during one of the Sunday dinners. A massive classic Southern wedding. It projects stability, family values. We will invite the investors. We will live stream it. It will be the social event of the season. I became a project manager for my own wedding. But every decision I made was vetoed if it did not fit the Roe brand. No wildflowers. We needed imported roses. No intimate ceremony. We needed a stage. Then came the contract. 3 weeks before the wedding, Beckett came home late. He tossed a thick envelope onto the coffee table. Just some paperwork, he said, loosening his tie. Dad's lawyers insist. It is standard stuff, a prenuptial agreement just to keep the business assets separate. You understand? I picked up the envelope. Of course, I expected one. Great, he said, walking toward the kitchen. Just sign it tonight so I can get it back to them tomorrow. We are on a tight schedule. I pulled the document out. It was 40 pages long. I walked into the home office, the small second bedroom I used for my work, and turned on the lamp. I did not just sign it. I read it. I had been reading contracts for 10 years at Crestline. I knew how to spot a loop. I knew how to spot a trap. The language in the prenup was aggressive. It did not just protect premarital assets. It waived my rights to any future earnings derived from intellectual property developed during the marriage. It had a clause that stated any reputational damage caused by the spouse could result in financial penalties. It was not a marriage contract. It was an employment agreement for an indentured servant. I walked out to the kitchen. Beckett was eating leftovers, scrolling on his phone. I need time to read this properly, I said. There are some definitions in here that are vague. I want my lawyer to look at it. Beckett stopped chewing. The charm dropped from his face like a mask falling off. Why? He asked. His voice was cold. Do you not trust me? It is not about trust, Beckett. It is a legal document. You would not sign a vendor contract without reading it. Why should I sign my life away without checking a fine print? He slammed his fork down. This is different. This is family. My parents are just trying to protect what they built. Why do you have to be so difficult about everything? You're always trying to find a problem. I am not being difficult, I said calmly. I am being smart. I will let you know in 2 days. He stared at me, his jaw working. For a second, I thought he was going to scream. Instead, he forced a tight, thin smile. Fine, 2 days. But do not push it, Isser. That night, I could not sleep. I got up at 2:00 in the morning to get a glass of water. As I walked down the hallway, I saw the light on in the living room. Beckett was on the balcony. The glass door cracked open slightly. He was on the phone. I stopped in the shadows of the hallway. She is reading it, Beckett said. His voice was low, devoid of the affection he usually performed for me. I know. I tried to rush her. She is sharper than she looks. Urs. He listened to the person on the other end. I knew immediately it was his father or his mother. "Do not worry," Beckett said. "I have it handled. If she signs it, we are good. We get the wedding. We get the press bump and she is locked down." He took a sip of his drink. "And if she does not sign?" he asked into the phone. He laughed, a short, cruel sound. "Yeah, I know. If she does not sign, we go to plan B. We burn her. We make sure she is so toxic that no one believes a word she says about the company. Yeah, I know the drill. The press kit is already drafted." My blood ran cold. The glass of water in my hand felt like a block of ice. Plan B. They had a contingency plan to destroy me if I did not submit. They had drafted a press kit to ruin my reputation. I was not a fiancé. I was a liability they were managing. I backed away silently, retreating to the bedroom. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the man I loved finish his drink and come to bed. He wrapped his arm around me thinking I was asleep. I did not move. I waited until his breathing evened out. The next morning, the day before the rehearsal, I did not confront him. I did not cry. I made coffee. I kissed him goodbye as he left for the office. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. I pulled the prenup out of the envelope. I called up the file for the wedding vendor contracts, the ones for the venue, the live stream, the catering, which were all under my LLC, Asheton Event Holdings. I was going to sign his prenup, but first I was going to update my own contracts. If they wanted to play with legal documents, I would show them exactly how the creative trifles girl handled paperwork. I picked up my pen. I was about to write a clause that no one in the Rowe family would ever bother to read because they were too busy looking down on me to look closely at what I was signing. The morning after I heard Beckett mention Plan B, I did not pack my bags. I did not scream. I did not call my father. Instead, I made a fresh pot of coffee, sat down at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. The sun was just coming up over the Nashville skyline, casting long, pale shadows across the hardwood floor, but my world had narrowed down to the glowing pixels of a Microsoft Word document. If the Rowe family wanted to treat our marriage like a hostile takeover, then I would stop acting like a bride and start acting like a chief compliance officer. I had spent a decade negotiating contracts for Crestline's Civic Studio. I knew how to read the white space between the paragraphs. I knew that what was not said was often more dangerous than what was written. And, most importantly, I knew that arrogance was the ultimate blinder. Beckett and his parents thought I was just a party planner. They thought my obsession with details was a cute domestic quirk. They had no idea that while they were playing checkers with their PR strategies, I was rewriting the rulebook for the game of chess. They did not even know we were playing. My first move was defensive. I logged into the state business registry portal and finalized the formation of a limited liability company I had started drafting weeks ago for freelance consulting. I named it Asheton Event Holdings. It sounded boring. It sounded administrative. That was the point. I linked Asheton Event Holdings to a separate bank account I had opened the previous year, one that Beckett did not have access to. I transferred the remaining wedding budget, the money that I had personally saved, and the contribution the Rose had transferred to our joint account for incidentals into the LLC. From that moment on, I was not Elor Asheton, the blushing bride. I was Asheton Event Holdings, a third-party vendor managing a corporate event disguised as a wedding. Then I opened the vendor contracts. The contracts for the venue, the catering, and most crucially, the live stream production team were still pending final signature. The Rose had insisted on the most expensive production crew in Nashville, a team that usually filmed music videos and corporate launches. They wanted high definition. They wanted multiple angles. They wanted the world to see the merger of the Rowe and Asheton brands. I opened the draft agreement for the production company, Lumina Media. I scrolled down to the standard liability section. It was boilerplate text protecting the videographers if the equipment failed or if the lighting was bad. I deleted the standard paragraph and began typing. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I was not writing poetry. I was writing armor. I inserted a new section. Clause 14, Content ownership and ethical conduct. It read, in the event that the proceedings are interrupted, altered, or utilized for purposes other than the solemnization of marriage, specifically including but not limited to public declarations of annulment, character defamation, or unsolicited reputational harm, all rights to the recorded footage, including raw files and live stream distribution, shall immediately revert to the contracting entity, Asheton Event Holdings. I paused and took a sip of coffee. It was a poison pill. If the wedding went smoothly, the clause meant nothing, but if they tried to pull a stunt, if they tried to use the cameras to broadcast my humiliation, they would accidentally be handing me the copyright to their own cruelty. I was not done. I moved to the cancellation and liability section. Standard contracts say that if the wedding is called off, the couple loses their deposit. I changed the language. Clause 18, liability for malicious disruption. In the event of a cancellation caused by the intentional premeditated actions of one party designed to cause public embarrassment or distress, the party responsible for said disruption shall assume full financial liability for all vendor costs, including remaining balances and cancellation fees. The contracting entity, Asheton Event Holdings, shall be held harmless. I read it over. It was legal. It was fair. And it was buried on page 12 of a 20-page technical writer about lighting rigs and sound checks. I printed 3 copies of everything. That evening, Beckett came home late again. He smelled of expensive scotch and the distinct ozone scent of a private jet cabin. He was flying high, literally and metaphorically. "Hey," he said, tossing his jacket on the sofa. "Did you sign the prenup?" "I am still reviewing it with my lawyer." I lied. My voice was calm. "But we need to lock down the production crew and the venue tonight. They are threatening to release our date if we do not send the signed riders by tomorrow morning." I slid the stack of papers across the granite island. Beckett sighed, rubbing his temples. "God, Isser, can't you just handle this? It is just cameras and flowers. Why do I have to sign everything?" "Because you are the primary financial guarantor on the venue," I said sweetly. "And because you wanted the big media package, they need the groom's signature for image release." He groaned, picking up a pen. He did not sit down. He stood there, leaning over the counter, flipping through the pages. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Please do not read it. Please be the arrogant man I know you are." He flipped past page 1. He flipped past page 5. He stopped at page 12. "What is all this?" he asked, pointing at a paragraph about lighting ratios. "Oh, that is just the technical specs for the drone shots," I said, not missing a beat. "I wanted to make sure they do not wash out your skin tone under the stage lights. You know how the LEDs can make people look gray." He huffed a laugh. "You really obsess over the weirdest things." "Isser, fine, if it makes me look good." He scribbled his signature at the bottom of page 12, right below the liability for malicious disruption clause. He flipped to the end, signed the main line, and tossed the pen down. "Done." "Are you happy?" "Very," I said. I took the papers and slid them into my folder. "I will scan these and send them over." "Great. I am going to shower. I have a call with the investors in Tokyo at 10. He walked away, leaving me with the signed warrant for his own financial execution. But the victory felt hollow because as I was scanning the documents to upload them to my secure cloud, not the shared family drive, I saw a notification pop up on Beckett's iPad, which he had left on the counter. It was an email notification, but it was not from his work email. It was from our shared household email account, the one we used for utility bills and grocery lists. Subject: DocuSign authorization confirmation. Meridian Shell Gamma. I frowned. Meridian Shell Gamma. That sounded like a corporate entity, not a utility company. I hesitated for only a second. I picked up the iPad. I knew the passcode. It was his birthday. I opened the email. It was a confirmation of a document signed 2 days ago. I opened the attachment. It was a tax filing for a subsidiary company called Roe Meridian Gamma, registered in Delaware. I scrolled to the bottom. Authorized Representative Isser Ashton. I stopped breathing. There was a digital signature there. It looked like my signature, but I had never seen this document in my life. I quickly searched the inbox for Asheton. Dozens of emails appeared. Most were junk, but 5 or 6 were official notifications from banks and state registries. Loan guarantee, asset transfer, liability waiver. They were using my name. Beckett or his father or their lawyers had been forging my signature on documents for shell companies. They were setting me up as the owner of assets I knew nothing about. If Rural Meridian Labs crashed, or if they were doing something illegal, I was the one on paper. I was the one who would go to jail. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the counter to stay upright. This was not just a bad breakup. This was criminal. This was Plan B. They were not just going to leave me. They were going to frame me. I needed help, and I needed it 10 minutes ago. I ran to the bedroom, grabbed my personal phone, and went out to the balcony. I locked the door behind me. I dialed Mara Keene. Mara was my best friend from college. She was now a compliance officer for a major hedge fund in New York. She ate fraud for breakfast. "Yes, sir," she answered on the second ring. "It is late. Is everything okay?" "No," I whispered. "Mara, listen to me carefully. Does the name Rho Meridian Gamma mean anything to you?" "No," she said, her voice instantly shifting from sleepy to sharp. "Why?" "Because apparently I am the authorized representative for it, and I just found 5 other documents where my signature was forged on loan guarantees." Silence on the line, then the sound of Mara, moving, probably sitting up in bed and grabbing her laptop. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice deadly serious. "Where are you right now?" "I am at the loft." "Beckett is in the shower." "Okay, listen to me. Do not confront him. Do not scream. Do not let him know. You know they are setting me up. Mara, if I leave him, I am on the hook for millions of dollars of debt. Aren't I?" "Likely," Mara said. "Or worse, they are using you as a straw man for dirty assets. If the SEC comes knocking, they point to you. Oh, we did not know. Isser handled that subsidiary. What do I do?" I felt tears prickling my eyes. I forced them back. "I am drowning here." "You are not drowning," Mara commanded. "You are diving. I need you to get evidence. Screenshots are good, but original files are better. Metadata. I need to prove that those documents were created on their computers, not yours. I need timestamps. I can't access his work laptop. I said he has biometric locks. Then look for physical drives." Mara said people like the Rose are arrogant. They think digital clouds are secure, but they always keep a physical backup of the dirty stuff. A hard drive, a USB, something they can grab if they have to run, find it, and then you bring it to me or to a lawyer who is not on their payroll. But Eiler, you have to be invisible. If they catch you digging, they will accelerate whatever timeline they have. "Okay," I said. "Okay, I can do this." "Isser," Mara added, her voice softening just a fraction. "Get out of there as soon as you have it. This is not safe." I hung up. I wiped my face. I walked back inside. Beckett came out of the bedroom, a towel around his waist. "Who were you talking to?" "Just the florist," I said. "They wanted to confirm the delivery time for the bouquets." "At 900 p.m.?" he asked, skeptical. "Wedding industry never sleeps," I said, forcing a smile. He shrugged and went to the kitchen for water. I waited until he was asleep. Then I began to search. I did not search the obvious places. I checked the pockets of his golf bag. I checked the false bottom of his humidor, and then I remembered something last week after a board meeting at the row house. Beckett had come home with a different briefcase. He had tossed it in the back of the guest closet and told me not to touch it because it contained patent prototypes. I crept into the guest room. I found the briefcase. It was locked, but it was a cheap combination lock. Beckett used the same code for everything the year his father bought the company. 1985 click. I opened the case. There were no prototypes. There were stacks of bank statements, and nestled in a small velvet pouch, usually used for cufflinks, was a silver USB drive. It was labeled with a piece of masking tape. On the tape, in Gordon Rowe's handwriting, was a single word: leverage. I did not plug it in. I did not need to see it yet to know what it was. This was the insurance policy. I closed the briefcase. I locked it. I took the USB drive and walked back to the master bedroom. I slipped it into the inside zipper pocket of my favorite handbag, the one I would carry on my wedding day. I lay down next to Beckett. He was snoring softly. I listened to the rhythm of his breath, the breath of a man who thought he owned the world. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I lay there in the dark, my hand resting on my stomach, visualizing the contract I had just tricked him into signing. Clause 18. He wanted a show, I would give him a show, but the script was mine now. I took the silver USB drive to a library 3 towns over. I did not trust the Wi-Fi at home, and I certainly did not trust the secure network at Crestline Civic Studio. I sat in a carrel in the back corner wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses like a cliché from a bad spy movie and plugged the drive into my personal laptop. The screen flickered and a folder appeared. It was titled simply Project Not. I clicked it open. I expected to find evidence of an affair. I expected photos of Beckett with a mistress or maybe hidden bank accounts where he was stashing gambling winnings. I was prepared for heartbreak. I was not prepared for a felony frame-up. The drive contained 3 subfolders: financials, legal, and narrative. I opened financials first. It was a labyrinth of spreadsheets. I saw transfers of large sums, $50,000 here, $100,000 there, moving from Rural Meridian Labs into a series of shell companies. That was standard white-collar crime. But then I saw the destination for the consulting fees. The money was being routed through accounts tagged with a very specific identifier, sub Asheton Event Holdings, my LLC. I felt the blood drain from my face. I opened the detailed transaction logs. They had created a duplicate bank account using my name and the tax ID of my new LLC, information Beckett had access to because I'd left my paperwork on the kitchen counter. They were funneling company money out of Rural Meridian Labs, washing it through a fake account with my name on it, and then moving it offshore. If the IRS or the SEC looked at this, it would not look like Beckett was embezzling from his own investors. It would look like his fiancé was stealing from him. I closed the folder, my hand shaking so hard I could barely control the trackpad. I opened the folder named Narrative. This was the kill shot. Inside was a collection of Word documents and PDFs. The first one was titled Draft Press Statement Post-Cancellation. I opened it. It was dated for the day after our wedding for immediate release. Beckett Rowe, founder of Rural Meridian Labs, announces with deep regret the cancellation of his marriage to Isser Asheton following the discovery of significant financial irregularities. Mr. Rowe is cooperating fully with authorities regarding the misappropriation of funds by external contractors. They had written the press release before I had even picked out the table linens. I scrolled down. It got worse. There was a document titled Media List Influencer Outreach. It was a spreadsheet of contacts, journalists at tech blogs, gossip columnists in Nashville, and even a few business influencers on social media. Next to each name was a specific angle to pitch. Contact Sarah Jenkins, Nashville Buzz, angle the gold digger who got court. Focus on her spending habits and the lavish wedding demands. Contact Mike Ross. Tech Daily angle. The internal betrayal. How a trusted partner siphoned seed money. They were not just going to dump me. They were going to paint me as a thief and a liar to cover up their own theft. They needed a villain to explain why the company money was missing. And I was the perfect scapegoat. I was the distraction. I pulled the USB drive out of the computer. I felt sick. I wanted to vomit. But beneath the nausea, something cold and hard was forming in my stomach. It was the absolute realization that the man I loved did not exist. Beckett Rowe was not a man. He was a conglomerate of lies in a bespoke suit. I needed a shark. Rory H. Alsted was not a warm man. His office was in a converted warehouse in the gulch with exposed brick walls and a desk made of reclaimed wood that cost more than my car. He did not offer me tea. He offered me a bottle of sparkling water and a silence that demanded, I speak first. I laid it all out, the prenup, the fake accounts, the press kit on the USB drive. Rory looked at the documents on his screen, scrolling through the narrative folder with a look of clinical fascination. This is thorough, Rory said. His voice was growly. They have weaponized a breakup. I have seen divorces get ugly, Isser. But this is not a divorce. This is a corporate hit job. Can I stop them? I asked. Can I leave now if I run? Maybe they cannot pin it on me. If you run, you look guilty, Rory said, looking me in the eye. If you disappear today, they release this narrative tomorrow. They will say you fled because you were caught. You will spend the next 10 years fighting federal charges from a non-extradition country, or you will be in prison. So what do I do? Rory leaned back. You have two choices. Option A, we file a preemptive lawsuit today. We blow it up. We accuse them of fraud. It becomes a messy public battle if he said, she said. You might win, but you will be dragged through the mud for years. And option B. Option B, Rory said, a small, dangerous smile touching his lips. We let them play their hand. We let them walk into the trap. We gather so much indisputable evidence that when we finally pull the trigger, there is no wiggle room. We do not just want to win an argument. We want a court order that gags them forever. Force them to expose themselves, I whispered. Exactly, Rory said. We need them to commit the act. We need them to try to destroy you because once they execute the plan and we prove it was malicious, we trigger every protection clause you wrote into those vendor contracts and we catch them lying under oath. I choose option B, I said. But, Rory said, then you have to go back. You have to be the loving bride. You have to let them think they have won. Can you do that? I thought about the spreadsheet with the gold digger angle. I thought about Evelyn calling me cute. Watch me, I said. The next 3 days were a masterclass in psychological torture. I went home to the loft. Beckett was there standing in the kitchen with a massive bouquet of hydrangeas. He looked tired, his eyes soft and pleading. I am sorry about the other night, he said, handing me the flowers. I am just stressed. The investors, the wedding, I took it out on you. I love you, Isser. You know that, right? He looked so sincere. If I had not read the file titled Post-Cancellation Strategy, I would have believed him. He was a terrifyingly good actor. I know, I said, burying my face in the flowers so he would not see my eyes. I am stressed too. Let's just get through this week. We will, he said, kissing the top of my head. After the wedding, everything will be perfect. He meant after the wedding is cancelled and you are destroyed. But he made it sound like a honeymoon. The next day, Evelyn called. She wanted to take me for the final dress fitting. I want to make sure everything is perfect for my new daughter, she said on the phone. I agreed. We met at the bridal salon. I stood on the pedestal while the seamstress adjusted the hem of my $12,000 gown. Evelyn sat on the sofa sipping champagne, watching me with that same shark-like gaze. You know, Evelyn said, setting down her glass. I was thinking about your speech for the reception, the thank you toast. What about it? I asked, looking at her in the mirror. I think you should focus less on the partnership aspect, she said, smoothing her skirt. It sounds a bit businesslike. Why not focus on how grateful you are that Beckett chose you, how he saved you from that little nonprofit job? It is more romantic. She wanted me to sound small. She wanted the recording to show a woman who admitted she was nothing without her man. That way, when they painted me as a leech, the jury would already have my confession. You are right, Evelyn, I said, forcing a smile that made my face ache. I should sound more grateful. I will rewrite it. Good girl, she said. I went home and documented the conversation in a secure log I shared with Rory. Date October 12th, time 2 in the afternoon. Subject coercion of public statement. I loved everything. Every time Beckett sent a text saying, can't wait for our big day. I screenshotted it. Every time his father emailed me about a last-minute signature for a vendor, I forwarded it to Rory. I was building a timeline of their deception. They were creating a narrative of a gold digger. I was creating a dossier of a conspiracy. Finally, it was the night before the wedding, the rehearsal dinner. It was held at a rooftop bar downtown. The air was crisp. Everyone was drinking expensive bourbon. The toasts were flowing. Beckett stood up and gave a speech about how lucky he was to find a woman who understood the vision. I sat there clapping, smiling, feeling like I was made of glass. Halfway through the night, I went to the restroom. On my way back, I passed the private smoking terrace. The door was slightly ajar. I heard Gordon Rose's voice. Do not worry about the fallout, Gordon was saying. The press release goes out at 5 minutes past the announcement. By the time she gets off the stage, she will be trending for all the wrong reasons. It feels harsh, Dad. Beckett's voice, a hint of hesitation. Just nerves. It is necessary, Gordon snapped. We need a clean break and a scapegoat for the audit. Tomorrow she gets dumped in front of hundreds. She will be so humiliated. She will stay silent. She will sign whatever settlement we put in front of her just to make it stop. Nah, Beckett said. Yeah, you are right. She is weak. She will fold. She is weak. I stood in the shadows of the hallway, listening to the man I was supposed to marry agree to my destruction. I did not fold. I did not cry. I turned around and walked back to the party. I sat down next to Beckett. I put my hand on his knee. He flinched, then covered my hand with his, smiling for the photographer who was circling the table. Are you okay? He asked. You look intense. I am fine, I said, looking him dead in the eyes. I am just ready for tomorrow. I think it is going to be a day no one will ever forget. He squeezed my hand. Me too, babe. Me too. He had no idea. I went back to the hotel room alone that night. Tradition, they said. I lay in the king-sized bed staring at the ceiling. The fear was gone. The sadness was gone. All that was left was the cold mechanical precision of the plan. I picked up my phone and sent one last message to Rory. They confirmed it. We are agreeing for tomorrow. Rory replied instantly. See you in court. I closed my eyes and finally slept. Tomorrow I would wear white. Tomorrow I would walk down the aisle. And tomorrow I would burn their house down with the very matches they had put in my hand. The rehearsal dinner was over, but the night was not. We were at the venue, the converted theater in downtown Nashville, for what Beckett called a technical run-through. It did not feel like a wedding rehearsal. It felt like the final dress rehearsal for a reality television finale, where the producer has decided to kill off the main character. The space was cavernous and freezing. The air conditioning was blasting to protect the floral arrangements that were being carted in by the truckload. The stage was dominated by a massive LED screen that was currently cycling through a slideshow of our photos, Beckett and Isser in Paris, Beckett and Isser at the gala, Beckett and Isser looking perfect. It was a monument to a relationship that was about to be publicly executed. I stood on the center mark, a piece of blue gaffer tape stuck to the polished floor. Chin up, please. The lighting director shouted from the darkness of the tech booth. We are getting a shadow on the groom's face. Beckett did not look at me. He looked at the monitor set up stage right. He stepped closer to me, his hand gripping my upper arm. It was not a caress. It was an adjustment. He moved me 2 inches to the left, physically repositioning me as if I were a potted plant that was blocking the view of the merchandise. Is the backlight too strong? Beckett called out to the crew. I want the audience to see the emotion. If it is too bright, it washes out the tears. The tears. He was planning on tears. He was choreographing the exact lighting conditions for my humiliation. It looks good, Mr. Rare, the director replied. Very dramatic. I stood there, my arms still throbbing slightly where he had gripped it. I looked out at the empty rows of chairs. Tomorrow, those seats would be filled with 500 witnesses. They thought they were coming to celebrate a union. In reality, they were coming to a demolition. Okay, let us run the entrance one more time, the stage manager yelled. Music in 3, 2, 1. The organ music blasted. It was so loud it rattled my teeth. I walked through the motions. Step, step, pause. Step, step, pause. I was a ghost haunting my own wedding. After the third run-through, Beckett dismissed the crew for a break. He walked past me without a word, his phone glued to his ear, discussing engagement metrics with someone who was definitely not a wedding planner. I retreated to the bridal suite, or the green room, as the staff kept calling it. I sat down in front of the illuminated vanity mirror. The lights around the glass were harsh, showing every pore, every line of exhaustion under my eyes. I looked tired. But a victim should look tired. The door opened behind me. I saw Evelyn Rowe in the mirror. She was wearing a cream-colored pantsuit that cost more than my first car. She carried a leather portfolio and a smile that did not reach her eyes. Darling, she said, her voice dripping with synthetic honey. You look exhausted. Are you drinking enough water? I am fine, Evelyn, I said, not turning around. Just nerves. Of course, she said, gliding into the room. She placed the portfolio on the vanity table right next to my hand. Just a few tiny administrative details to clear up before the big day. You know how Gordon is with paperwork. He wants everything tidy. She opened the portfolio and slid a single sheet of paper toward me. "It is just the final guest confirmation list," she said casually. "We need you to sign off on the seating chart adjustments so the caterer can release the final headcount invoice." Standard stuff. I looked at the paper at the top. It indeed listed Table 4 and Table 5 with some swap names, but the text block at the bottom was dense. The font was small, much smaller than the rest of the document. I picked up a pen, twirling it in my fingers. Evelyn watched the pen. Her eyes were hungry. I lowered my gaze to the fine print. By signing below, the undersigned acknowledges that all media, audio, and visual recordings of the event are the sole property of Rome Meridian Labs and its affiliates. The undersigned further waives any right to legal recourse regarding reputational claims, emotional distress, or public portrayal arising from the events of the date in question. It was not a seating chart sign-off. It was a release form. It was a liability waiver disguised as a catering order. If I signed this, I would be giving them legal permission to destroy me on camera and agreeing in advance not to sue them for it. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, but I forced my hand to remain steady. "Evelyn," I said, my voice light, feigning confusion, "this bottom section, it looks like legal language. Why is there a media waiver on a catering list?" Evelyn did not blink. Her smile tightened at the corners. "Oh," that she waved a manicured hand dismissively. "That is just boilerplates for the live stream. Because of the music copyright. You know, YouTube is so strict these days. It just says we are allowed to broadcast the wedding without getting muted. Just sign it, dear. The caterer is waiting." She was lying to my face. She was looking me in the eye and lying with the ease of a sociopath. I set the pen down. "I think I will wait," I said. "I want to read it properly when I'm not so tired. I can sign it in the morning." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10. Evelyn's face changed. The mask did not fall off completely, but it cracked. The motherly warmth evaporated, revealing the steel underneath. "Sir," she said, her voice low and sharp. "Do not be difficult. It is a piece of paper. Do you not trust us?" "It is not about trust, Evelyn," I said, meeting her gaze in the mirror. "It is about being careful. I do not sign things I have not read thoroughly. My father taught me that." "Your father was a school teacher," Evelyn snapped. "He did not understand how the real world works. This is how business is done. Sir, you sign the paper or you hold up the entire production. Then the production waits," I said softly. We stared at each other for a long moment. I saw the calculation behind her eyes. She was wondering if she could force me. She was wondering if she could forge it. But there were cameras in the hallway. She could not make a scene here. "Fine," Evelyn said, snatching the paper back. "You are very high maintenance for someone with so little to offer. Sir, I hope you realize how lucky you are that Beckett tolerates this." She turned on her heel and marched out of the room, slamming the door hard enough to make the makeup brushes rattle on the table. I let out a breath I'd been holding for 2 minutes. My hands started to shake. They were terrified. They were trying to close every loophole before the sun came up. I grabbed my phone. I opened the encrypted app. They just tried to get me to sign a media release disguised as a seating chart. I refused. 3 seconds later, 3 dots appeared. Then the reply, "Rory, good. Do not sign anything. Not even a receipt for a coffee. They are scared. They know the defamation laws better than we thought, and they are trying to indemnify themselves. If they are pushing this hard, they are going to go full nuclear tomorrow." Me, I know. Beckett is positioning me on stage like a prop. He is checking the lighting for the breakup scene. Rory, let him. The more produced it looks, the better for us. It proves premeditation. Just stick to the plan. If they perform tomorrow, we move the stage to the courtroom. I locked the phone and slipped it into my bra. I could not risk leaving it in my bag anymore. The door opened again. This time it was Beckett. He walked in, bringing the smell of the cold venue air with him. He looked at me, and for a second I saw a flash of the man I used to love. He looked tired. He looked almost regretful, but then he blinked and the CEO mask was back in place. "Mom says you are being difficult about the paperwork." He said. He did not sound angry. He sounded disappointed. "I just wanted to read it, Beckett." He sighed and walked over to me. He placed his hands on my shoulders. His grip was heavy. He looked at our reflection in the mirror, him standing tall and powerful, me sitting small and pale. "Hiller," he said, leaning down so his mouth was close to my ear, "tomorrow is a big day. There's a lot of money on the line, a lot of reputations. I need you to be perfect. Can you do that for me?" "I will be perfect," I whispered. "Good," he said. "Just smile. Even if things get emotional, just smile and let it happen. Afterward, I will handle everything. I will make sure you are taken care of." Taken care of. It sounded like a promise to a pet or a threat to a loose end. He was telling me that he was going to destroy me, but he would pay for the therapy afterward, or perhaps just pay for the silence. "I understand," I said. "Get some rest," he said, patting my shoulder twice. "You look pale." He left. I sat there for another minute, listening to the silence of the room. I felt suffocated. I needed air. I needed to see something real, something that was not a stage prop or a lie. I grabbed my coat and slipped out the back door of the suite. Avoiding the main stage where the crew was still calibrating the damn LED wall, I walked down the narrow service corridor and pushed open the heavy steel exit door. The night air outside was cold and smelled of city exhaust and damp pavement. I took a deep gulp of it. I was in the rear parking lot, the area reserved for vendors and staff. It was mostly empty, just a few catering vans and a black sedan parked near the gate. I walked toward the edge of the pavement, hugging my coat tighter around myself. Then I saw him. A man was standing in the shadow of a street lamp near the loading dock. He was wearing a generic gray windbreaker and holding a thick manila envelope. He was not on his phone. He was not smoking. He was just watching. He looked up as I stepped into the light. He did not look away. He looked at me, then glanced down at a piece of paper in his hand, probably a photograph, and then looked back at me. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He was not a guest. He was not staff. He was the process server. Rory had not just sent a lawyer. He had sent the mechanism of the law. That man was waiting for the signal. He was the physical embodiment of the trap I had set. Beckett had his cameras. He had his press kits. He had his parents cheering in the front row. But I had the man in the gray windbreaker. A strange calm settled over me. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp certainty. They were going to try to break me. They were going to try to turn my life into a cautionary tale on a live stream. But they had forgotten the most important rule of a performance. Never underestimate the person who wrote the contracts. I turned around and walked back toward the heavy steel door. I could hear the faint sound of the organ music starting up again inside another sound check for the funeral of my marriage. I went back into the dressing room. I saw my wedding dress hanging on the rack. It was beautiful. It was white lace and silk, innocent and pure. I reached out and touched the fabric. Tomorrow I would put it on. I would walk out into the light. I would let them throw their stones. And when the dust settled, I would be the only one left standing. The rehearsal was over. The real show was about to begin. The lights were not just bright. They were physical. They pressed against my skin like a hot iron, searing the moment into my memory. The organ music faded into a dissonant hum, leaving only the buzzing sound of the camera drone hovering above the guests like a mechanical wasp. I stood there, the silk of my dress feeling heavy and suffocating, while Beckett Rowe held the microphone. He did not look at me. He looked at the red tally light of the main camera at the back of the room. He was framed perfectly by the white roses, a tragic hero in a story he had written himself. "Marriage," Beckett began, his voice amplified and rich, echoing off the high ceilings. "Marriage is built on a foundation of absolute trust. It is a covenant, and when that covenant is threatened by deceit, we have a moral obligation to pause." He let the silence hang there. It was theatrical. It was practiced. "I have struggled with this decision," he continued, looking down at his shoes and then up at the audience with wet, glistening eyes. "But I cannot stand here and pledge my life to a lie, because the truth needs to be respected." He took a breath, the drone word louder as it descended for a close-up. "The wedding is off. Beckett declared. The air left the room. 500 people froze. The shock was a physical wave rolling from the back row to the front, and then the sound tore through the silence, clapping. It started in the front row. Evelyn Rose stood up. She did not look distressed. She looked triumphant. She was clapping her hands high in the air, a sharp, violent rhythm. "Bravo!" she shouted. "Bravo, Beckett! You did the right thing." Gordon Rose stood up beside her, pumping his fist. Integrity, son. Integrity above all. The rest of the room remained seated, paralyzed in horror. People were looking around, mouths open, unable to process what they were seeing. A groom had just humiliated his bride, and his parents were cheering like their team had just scored a touchdown. It was grotesque. It was social horror in its purest form. Beckett lowered the microphone slightly, soaking in his parents' approval. He turned to look at May. He expected to see a broken woman. He expected me to be on my knees, sobbing, begging him to explain, giving the cameras the crazy X footage they needed for the press kit. I did not move. I did not cry. I did not even frown. I looked him dead in the eye. I took one step closer. I did not reach for the microphone. I did not need it. The acoustics of the stage were excellent, and the lapel mic clipped to his tuxedo was live. "Are you sure?" I asked. My voice was soft, but in the dead silence of the room it carried. Beckett blinked. The question threw him off. He was ready for tears. He was not ready for a deposition. "But," he snapped, forgetting his tragic hero persona for a split second. "Are you sure you want to do this, Beckett?" I asked again, my face completely blank. He bristled. The arrogance flared up, the mask slipping. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, but he forgot the sensitivity of the audio equipment. He forgot that he was broadcasting to the internet. "You think you can keep the shares?" he hissed. "You think you can walk away with my company assets after this? You get nothing. You are done." The speakers popped with the persuasives of his words, shares, assets. The room heard it. The live stream heard it. He had just stood there preaching about truth and moral obligation. And in the very next breath he had revealed the real game. It was not about love. It was not about lies. It was about a cap table. The cheering from the front row faltered. Even Evelyn stopped clapping. The guests began to murmur. A low, confused rumble. The narrative had just glitched. Beckett realized what he had said. His eyes widened. He pulled the microphone away, looking toward his father for guidance. I did not give him time to recover. I reached down, slid the engagement ring off my finger and placed it on the podium. The metal made a sharp click against the plexiglass. I turned around. "Sir," Beckett shouted, his voice cracking. "Do not walk away from me." I walked. I moved with a steady, fluid rhythm. I did not run. Running looks like guilt. Walking looks like dignity. I descended the stairs of the stage. The drone dipped low, trying to catch my expression, but I kept my chin high, staring straight ahead. I walked past the front row. I saw Evelyn's face. The triumph was gone, replaced by a sudden, sharp suspicion. She knew something was wrong. She knew the script had just been rewritten. I walked up the aisle. The guests stared at me. Some looked pitying. Some looked horrified. I did not make eye contact. I was not part of their audience anymore. I pushed through the heavy double doors at the back of the hall. The moment the doors swung shut, the sound of the room was cut off. The murmurs, the feedback, the confusion. It was all behind me. I was in the lobby. It was empty. I walked straight to the bridal suite. I opened the door, stepped inside, and turned the deadbolt. Click. Only then did I stop. I leaned back against the door. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands, which had been so steady on stage, began to tremble. I closed my eyes and took one single deep breath. I held it for 4 seconds. I exhaled for 4 seconds. "Do not break." Not yet. I opened my eyes. Rory H. Halstead was sitting at the vanity table. He was not wearing his lawyer's suit. He was wearing a tuxedo, looking for all the world like a guest who had slipped away to make a phone call. He had been in the audience. He had seen everything. On the table in front of him sat a slim black leather folder. "That was impressive," Rory said. His voice was calm, a soothing counterpoint to the adrenaline flooding my veins. He admitted to the financial motive on a hot mic. We have the recording. The live stream ripped it automatically. Did the process server see it? I asked, walking over to the table. I unzipped the back of my dress. I could not breathe in the corset anymore. He is outside, Rory said. He is ready. Rory opened the folder. Inside were two documents. One was the emergency motion for a temporary restraining order and asset freeze. The other was a time-stamped log of the evidence I had gathered, the USB drive contents, the forged emails, the recording of Gordon Rowe at the rehearsal dinner. They are going to come for me, I said, stepping out of the heavy silk dress underneath. I was wearing a simple white slip. I grabbed my trench coat from the chair and threw it over my shoulders. It was not bridal. It was armor. They are already coming, Rory said. He nodded toward the door. Heavy footsteps pounded down the hallway. Then a fist hammered on the door. Yes, sir, it was not Beckett. It was the best man, one of Beckett's college friends who worked as a fixer for the company. Yes, sir, opened the door. We need to talk. I looked at Rory. He stood up. He buttoned his jacket. Yes, sir. The voice shouted again. Evelyn has an agreement she wants you to look at. Just a standard separation agreement. We can settle this right now. $50,000. Just sign it and you can go. $50,000. They thought they could buy my silence for the price of a mid-range sedan after trying to frame me for grand larceny. The insult was almost funny. Rory moved to the door. He did not look like a guest anymore. He looked like a shark smelling blood in the water. Let me handle the door, Rory said quietly. You grabbed the file. I picked up the black folder. I picked up my purse, ensuring the USB drive was still in the zippered pocket. Rory unlocked the deadbolt. He opened the door just 3 in. The security chain was not on, but Rory blocked the gap with his body. Outside, the best man and 2 of the Rowe family security guards were standing there holding a clipboard. They looked ready to barge in. They stopped when they saw Rory. Who are you? The best man demanded. Where is Isser? My name is Rory H. Halstead, he said. He did not raise his voice. He handed the best man a business card through the crack in the door. I am MS. Asherton's legal counsel. The best man blinked, staring at the card. Lawyer. She does not need a lawyer. This is a family matter. Not anymore, Rory said. Beckett Rowe just publicly terminated a contract and attempted to defame my client regarding shared assets. That makes it a legal matter. She needs to sign this, the best man said, thrusting the clipboard forward. It is a non-disclosure agreement. If she signs, we will not release the press kit. The press kit you drafted 3 days ago, Rory asked. The one titled Project Nut. We already have it, and we have the metadata proving when it was written. The color drained from the best man's face. He took a step back. Tell Mr. Rowe, Rory said, his voice dropping to a dangerously low register, that MS. Asherton will not be signing anything from this moment forward. Every word spoken between these parties will be said in a court of law. Rory slammed the door. He locked it again. We heard shouting outside. We heard someone running down the hall, probably to tell Evelyn that the mouse had brought a trap of her own. We have 3 minutes before they figure out the back exit, Rory said. Are you ready? I am ready, I said. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time. My hair was still done up in an intricate bridal chignon. My makeup was still flawless. I looked like a bride, but as I tied the belt of my trench coat, covering the white slip, I looked like something else. I looked like a witness. Rory opened the rear service door of the suite, the one that led directly to the loading dock. We stepped out into the cold night air. The wind hit my face, drying the sweat on my forehead. The black sedan was waiting, engine running. I got into the back seat. Rory slid in beside me. Where to? The driver asked. It was not the hotel. It was not my apartment. It was not a bar to drown my sorrows. I looked out the window at the venue. I could see the glow of the stage lights through the side windows. I could imagine Beckett inside trying to spin the story, trying to regain control of the narrative. He had no idea that the story had already left the building. The Davidson County Courthouse, I said. Night Filing Division. The car pulled away. I did not look back. The stage was dark now. The real show was about to start. under the fluorescent lights of the law. The Davidson County Courthouse at 10:00 at night was a different world from the polished, flower-filled venue I had just fled. There were no white roses here, no soft lighting, no string quartets. There was only the low, angry hum of a vending machine in the hallway and the harsh antiseptic buzz of fluorescent lights that made everyone look like a corpse. My heels clicked against the linoleum floor. The sound was sharp, lonely, and echoing. I kept my trench coat buttoned all the way to my chin, but the hem of my silk wedding dress peeked out at the bottom, dragging slightly on the dirty floor. It was a grotesque image, a bride in a trench coat, walking into night court with a lawyer instead of a husband. Rory walked beside me. He moved with a terrifying efficiency. He did not look at me with pity. He looked at the paperwork in his hands as if it were a weapon he was loading. We were there for an emergency hearing. Rory had called in a favor with the clerk to get us in front of the duty judge, arguing that immediate and irreparable harm was occurring while we spoke. "He is going to be here," Rory said, not slowing his pace. "This team monitors legal filings. As soon as we logged the request for the temporary restraining order, they got a ping." "Good," I said. My voice sounded strange in the empty corridor, flat and metallic. "I want him to see me." We entered the small hearing room. It was not the grand courtroom from television dramas. It was a functional room with wood-paneled walls that smelled of lemon polish and old paper. Judge Holloway, a woman with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, sat behind the bench. She looked tired. She looked like she wanted to be home watching the news, not dealing with a runaway bride. 5 minutes later, the double doors swung open. Beckett walked in. He was still in his tuxedo, though he had removed the bow tie. He was flanked by 2 men in dark suits. One was the family lawyer, a man named Sterling, who I had met once at a Christmas party. Sterling looked annoyed. Beckett, however, looked energized. He saw me sitting at the plaintiff's table, still clutching my coat. A smile touched the corner of his mouth, that same pitying, condescending smile he used when I asked a question about the business he thought was too complex for me. He thought he had already won. In his mind, we were not married. I had signed nothing but a few vendor contracts. I was just a hysterical ex-girlfriend trying to make a scene in court because I had failed to make one on stage. "Your Honor," Sterling began before he had even fully sat down, "this is ridiculous. Mr. Rowe is the victim of a very public, very emotional breakup that occurred less than 2 hours ago. This filing is a harassment tactic by a distraught former partner." Judge Holloway looked over her glasses. "Mr. Halstead, why are we here at this hour? This looks like a domestic matter for family court, not an emergency injunction." Rory stood up. He did not raise his voice. He did not point fingers. He simply opened the black folder. "Your Honor, this is not a domestic dispute." Rory said, "This is a corporate dispute regarding the misappropriation of funds, fraud, and the intentional destruction of evidence within a commercial partnership." Beckett scoffed. It was a loud, sharp sound. "Partnership. She is an event planner. We were never married. Ms. Asheton," Rory continued, ignoring Beckett, "is the authorized representative for Rho Meridian Gamma, a subsidiary of Mr. Rose's primary holding company. She is also the sole proprietor of Asheton Event Holdings, which is currently the primary vendor for the event that took place tonight. We have evidence that Mr. Rowe and his associates have already begun deleting communications and altering financial records that link these entities." Rory slid a piece of paper across the bench. It was the transaction log I had pulled from the USB drive. "These are transfers of $50,000 and $120,000. Moved yesterday from the defendant's company into accounts bearing my client's name without her knowledge. Tonight, he publicly terminated the relationship. If this court does not issue an injunction immediately, the defendant will wipe the servers, leaving my client criminally liable for these funds." The room went silent. The judge picked up the paper. Her eyes scanned the columns. Beckett shifted in his seat. The arrogance wavered. He leaned over and whispered something to Sterling. Sterling frowned. "Your Honor," Sterling said, standing up, but his voice lacked its earlier punch. "These are internal accounting matters. Ms. Asheton is merely a signatory. This is a misunderstanding. Mr. Rowe canceled the wedding because of a breakdown in trust. He has the right to protect his company from a disgruntled ex. A breakdown in trust, Judge Holloway repeated. She looked at Beckett. Mr. Rowe, you staged a public cancellation at a live-streamed event funded by corporate sponsors. You handed out press kits, and now I am seeing wire transfers into the plaintiff's name that she claims she did not authorize. Do you understand the legal exposure you have created for yourself? Beckett stood up. He smoothed his tuxedo jacket. He decided to play the role that always worked for him, the moral crusader. Your Honor, Beckett said, his voice dropping to a register of deep sincerity. I understand this looks messy, but I did what I had to do. I could not marry a woman who was not who I thought she was. I was trying to save my family's reputation. I was emotional. I was heartbroken. Heartbroken? Rory repeated flatly. Rory picked up a tablet from the table. Your Honor, I would like to submit Exhibit C. This is audio recorded from the stage microphone at the moment of the cancellation. It was live-streamed to 3,000 people. Rory pressed play. The sound was tiny but clear in the quiet room. Beckett's voice. You think you can keep the shares. You think you can walk away with my company assets after this. You get nothing. You are done. The recording stopped. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of a narrative shattering against a wall of facts. Beckett froze. He stared at the tablet as if it were a bomb. He had forgotten in his anger, in his arrogance. He had forgotten that he was wearing a wire. Judge Holloway looked at Beckett. The fatigue was gone from her face, replaced by a razor-sharp glare. That does not sound like a man heartbroken over love, Mr. Rowe, the judge said. That sounds like a man worried about a cap table. She picked up her gavel. She did not bang it. She just held it. A promise of violence. I am granting the temporary restraining order, she said. Her voice was clipped. Effective immediately. Mr. Rowe, you and your family, your employees, and any associated entities are hereby enjoined from deleting, altering, or moving any digital or physical records related to Rome Meridian Labs, Rome Meridian Gamma, and Asherton Event Holdings. Sterling tried to interrupt. Your Honor, a freeze on the lads while I am not done, Judge Holloway snapped. I am also ordering the preservation of all funds currently held in escrow for the wedding vendors. No one gets a refund until I determine who actually paid for this event. And finally, I am issuing a no-contact order. You will not speak to Ms. Asherton. You will not text her. You will not have your mother call her. She looked directly at Beckett. If I find out that a single email has been deleted after this timestamp, I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand? Beckett looked pale. The stage lights were gone. The cheering parents were gone. There was just the law. Cold and unyielding. I understand, he whispered. Good, the judge said. We will reconvene for a full hearing in 72 hours. Clark stamped the order. Rory nodded to the judge. He began packing up his files. His movements were calm, deliberate. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I locked my knees. I'd buttoned my trench coat tighter. Beckett and Sterling were already moving toward the door. As they passed our table, Beckett stopped. He looked at me. His eyes were not angry anymore. They were confused. He looked like a man who had reached for a tool he had used 1,000 times, his charm, his money, his family name, and found it had turned to dust in his hand. Yes, sir, he said. His voice was low, barely a whisper. You are overreacting. We could have fixed this. You are making a mistake. I looked at him. I saw the sweat on his hairline. I saw the fear behind the contact lenses. No, Beckett, I said. I am not overreacting. I am doing it right. He opened his mouth to say something else, but Rory stepped between us, his shoulder blocking Beckett's view of me. Walk away, Mr. Rory said, before you violate the order that is not even 5 minutes old. Beckett clenched his jaw, turned, and walked out the double doors. The sound of his dress shoes fading down the hallway was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. We have the order, Rory said, handing me a copy of the paperwork with the wet ink of the court stamp still fresh. It is a shield. Now we need a sword. We have 3 days, I said, looking at the document. 3 days to find out what else is on the USB drive. Let's go, Rory said. We walked out of the courtroom, and down the long, empty corridor toward the exit. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. I just wanted to sleep. I wanted to take off the wedding dress and burn it. We pushed through the heavy glass doors of the courthouse entrance and stepped out into the night air of Nashville. The moment we crossed the threshold, my purse began to vibrate. It was a short buzz, then another, then a long continuous vibration that made the leather strap hum against my shoulder. I pulled my phone out. The screen was lit up with notifications. Text messages from numbers I did not know, alerts from Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. I unlocked the screen. The top notification was a link sent by Mara. It is viral. The clip of him dumping you is everywhere, but look at the comments. His team is already spinning it. I opened the link. It was a video on a popular gossip page. The caption read, "CEO saves himself from gold digger at the altar. You won't believe the amount of debt she tried to hide." The video had 2 million views. The war in the courtroom was paused for the night, but the war on the internet had just begun, and they were using the exact script from the narrative folder I had found. They were not waiting for the morning news. They were trying to bury me while I was still driving home. The morning sun that filtered through the blinds of Mara's guest bedroom did not feel like a new beginning. It felt like an interrogation lamp. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand, a continuous angry buzz that had likely been going on for hours. I reached for it, my hand instinctively tightening around the device. I unlocked the screen. The world had not waited for the sun to rise. The world had spent the last 8 hours tearing me apart. My name was trending, not just locally in Nashville, but nationally. The gold digger was sitting at number 4 on the trending topics list. I tapped it against my better judgment. It was a bloodbath. The narrative file I had seen on the USB drive had been executed with military precision. A video clip of the wedding cancellation was circulating, but it was not the raw footage. It was a chopped and screwed edit. It showed Beckett looking tearful and noble, saying, "The truth needs to be respected." Then it cut sharply to me, asking, "Are you sure?" But they had zoomed in on my face to make my expression look cold, almost reptilian. They had cut out his comment about the shares. They had cut out the cheering parents. The captions were brutal. "Look at her face. She is calculating the alimony. He dodged a bullet. She looks like she would sell his kidney for a handbag. I heard she tried to embezzle his seed funding." Typical predator. It was exactly the story Evelyn Rowe had paid for. She had hired a crisis management firm, a fixer team, and they were earning every cent of their retainer. They were flooding the zone with bots and anonymous accounts, amplifying the lie until it looked like public opinion. I walked into the kitchen. Mara was already there, pacing, a phone pressed to her ear and a laptop open on the counter. She looked up when I entered, her eyes fierce. "No," Mara was saying into the phone. "I do not care if it is hosted on a server in Panama. It violates the platform's terms of service regarding targeted harassment, and we have a court order stamped by a Davidson County judge as of 10 last night. Take it down or we add you to the lawsuit as a co-conspirator." She hung up and looked at me. "Coffee is in the pot. Do not look at Twitter." "Too late," I said, pouring a mug. My hands were steady. The shock had burned off, leaving only a cold, hard resolve. They are following the script, Mara, the narrative folder. They are hitting every beat, and we are hitting back, Rory said. I had not noticed him sitting at the small dining table. He looked fresh despite probably not having slept. I have already sent cease and desist letters to 3 local blogs that reposted the embezzlement rumor. I attached the temporary restraining order. One of them has already retracted. "It is like trying to hold back the tide with a spoon," I said, sitting down. "We do not need to stop the tide," Rory corrected. "We just need to prove that the moon controlling it is named Evelyn Rowe. We are logging every bot, every timestamp, every identical phrase used by independent accounts. It establishes a pattern of coordinated defamation." My phone buzzed again. This time it was not a social media notification. It was a call from Crestline Civic Studio. It was the executive director. My stomach dropped. "I have to take this," I said. I stepped onto the balcony. "Hello, David." "Yes, sir." David's voice was tight. He sounded pained. I saw the news and the board members saw the news. I know, David. We are getting calls. ISR donors, big ones. They are asking about the financial irregularities mentioned in the blogs. They are worried about the Garler funds. I know it is nonsense. I know you are the most honest person I have ever hired. But the perception is poison. I finished for him. We are a nonprofit, David said, his voice cracking slightly. We survive on trust. If people think our director of development is involved in corporate fraud, he did not have to finish the sentence. I looked out at the Nashville skyline. I loved my job. I loved the work I did. And the Rose had taken that from me, too. I understand, I said. I will send you my resignation letter within the hour. Sir, no, David said quickly. I do not want you to quit. Just maybe a leave of absence until this clears up. I will not let them drag Crestline into this, I said firmly. I will take an unpaid administrative leave, effective immediately, and I will issue a statement saying it was my decision to focus on personal legal matters that protects the organization. There was a long silence on the line. You are a class act, Isla. I am so sorry. I hung up. I did not cry. I did not have time to grieve my career. I had a war to win. I went back inside and told Rory and Mara. Rory nodded approvingly. It mitigates damages. It shows you are responsible. We will add the lost wages to the settlement demand. Then my phone pinged with a secure message. It was an app I rarely used. Signo. The number was unknown. I cannot do this anymore. I saw what they are doing to you online. It is sick. I stared at the screen. Who is this? I typed back. 3 dots appeared. Then Drew Mallory, the CFO of Roe Meridian Labs, the man who signed the checks, the man who had always been kind to me at company dinners, the one who rolled his eyes when Gordon Rose started monologuing about his own genius. Drew, I typed, talk to me. They are scrubbing the servers. Drew wrote, Beckett and Gordon, they are panicked about the court order, but they are missing the hard copies in the off-site storage. I have a file. What is in the file? The real reason for the wedding, he replied. A PDF file appeared in the chat. It took 10 seconds to download. I opened it on my phone, then cast it to Mara's TV screen so we could all see. It was a pitch deck, not for a product, but for a Series B funding round. The target audience was a group of extremely conservative family values angel investors based in Texas. Look at the date. Rory pointed out 3 months ago. The pitch deck outlined a strategy to secure $50 million in capital. One of the key risk mitigation slides featured a photo of Beckett. The text read, Founder stability. Beckett Rowe is entering a traditional marriage, solidifying his community standing and moral leadership. They needed the wedding to close the deal. I realized the investors were skittish about Beckett's playboy reputation. They wanted a family man. Keep reading, Rory said. I scrolled down. Drew had attached a second document. This one was a draft legal agreement titled Asset Purchase and Liability Transfer Agreement. It was dated for 2 days after the wedding. I read the legalese, my blood turning to ice. The agreement outlined a restructuring of Roe Meridian Labs. The company was splitting into 2 entities. One entity, Meridian Prime, would keep the intellectual property, the patents, and the new investment money. The second entity, Meridian Gamma, would retain the debts, the failed clinical trial lawsuits, and the outstanding vendor liabilities, and the listed owner of Meridian Gamma is Sir Asheton. They were going to sell the company, I whispered. They were going to sell the good parts to the investors and dump the toxic waste into the shell company they put in my name. Plan B, Rory said, his face hard as stone. If you signed the prenup, they would have trapped you that way. When you hesitated, they decided to destroy you publicly to discredit you so that when the debt collectors came from Meridian Gamma, no one would believe you when you said it wasn't yours. They would just say, oh, look, the gold digger ran the company into the ground. It was not just a breakup. It was a financial murder plot. They were going to leave me with millions of dollars in corporate debt and a reputation so tattered I could never get a job to pay it off. This is criminal fraud, Mara said, her voice shaking with rage. This is prison time. Only if we can prove they intended to execute it, Rory said. This is a draft. They will claim it was just a brainstorming exercise. Drew said they are scrubbing the servers. I said that means they are destroying the metadata. That proves they created this plan months ago. Rory stood up. I am going back to the judge. I am filing for an emergency expansion of the order. I want a forensic preservation team in their office within the hour. If they shred one more document, I will have Beckett in handcuffs by dinner time. Rory left the apartment, his phone already glued to his ear. 2 hours later, the dynamic shifted. I was sitting on the couch watching the news. They were actually covering the wedding fiasco on the local midday broadcast when my personal phone rang. It was Beckett. The court order said, no contact. He was breaking the law just by dialing the number. I looked at Mar. She nodded. Answer it, speaker. I tapped the green button. This is Eller. Isser. Beckett's voice was ragged. He sounded like he had been running. Isser, please, you have to stop this. I am not doing anything, Beckett, I said calmly. I am sitting in a room. You are the one scrubbing servers. There was a choked silence on the other end. How do you look? Baby, please. We can fix this. I made a mistake. The pressure my dad had got to me. I did not mean to hurt you. You drafted a press release calling me a thief. I said you set up a shell company in my name to dump your debt. That is not a mistake. That is a strategy. No, it was just a contingency. He was panicking. The smooth CEO voice was gone, replaced by the whine of a child caught stealing. I listen. I can make it right. Come meet me. Just us. No lawyers. I will give you a check. $500,000 right now. Just tell your lawyer to withdraw the forensic motion. Please, if they come in here, they will ruin the company. He was bribing me. He was terrified. The forensic team was probably knocking on his lobby door right now. You are scared, Beckett, I said. I love you, he shouted, desperate. I still love you. We can go away. We can go to Carbo. Just stop the lawyers. You do not love me. I said, you love not going to jail. I hung up. I blocked the number. I looked at Mara. He is done. He is crumbling. Mara agreed. But he is not the one who wrote the script. Beckett is not smart enough to design a two-tier corporate liability transfer. No, I said he is not. The afternoon dragged on. Rory texted updates. The judge had granted the forensic order. Independent auditors were currently seizing the servers at Roro Meridian Labs. The crisis team Evelyn hired had gone silent, likely because their checks were about to bounce if the company accounts were frozen. Night fell. The city lights of Nashville twinkled outside, indifferent to the destruction of the Rowe dynasty. At 9:00, the doorbell rang. Mara checked the camera. There is no one there, just a packet on the mat. I walked to the door. I opened it cautiously. Lying on the welcome mat was a thick manila envelope. There was no postage. It had been hand-delivered. I picked it up. It was heavy. I brought it inside and placed it on the kitchen island. I used a knife to slit the top open. I pulled out the contents. It was a stack of printed emails, and on top of them was a handwritten note on yellow legal pad paper. The handwriting was jagged, aggressive, and familiar. I read the note. He was never going to marry you. I told him from day one, use her, then lose her. But he got soft. He wanted to keep you as a pet. I had to force his hand. I looked at the emails. They were between Gordon Rowe and the family lawyer. Sterling. They dated back 2 years. Gordon, she is useful for the creative stuff, but she is a liability for the long game. Get her to sign the prenup. If she doesn't, we trigger the embezzlement narrative. I want the drafts ready by October. Sterling, that is risky. Gordon, if she fights back, Gordon, she won't fight. She is a baker's daughter. She doesn't have the stomach for blood. We crush her. We take the funding, and we move on. I lowered the paper. Beckett was the face. Evelyn was the cheerleader, but Gordon Rowe was the architect. He had looked at me across the dinner table every Sunday for 4 years, smiling, passing the potatoes, all while designing the blueprints for my destruction. He thought I didn't have the stomach for blood. I looked at the stack of evidence. The forensic team had the servers. I had the emails. I had the recordings. I picked up my phone and texted Rory. I know who the real target is. It is Gordon, and I have the smoking gun. The rehearsal was over. The opening act was done. Tomorrow we were going to the main event, and I was bringing enough fire to burn the entire Rowe family tree to the ground. The yellow legal pad paper sat on the kitchen island like a declaration of war. I stared at the jagged, aggressive handwriting, and for the first time in 4 years, the image of the Rowe family finally came into sharp focus. I had always thought Gordon Rowe was a passive figure, a man who read his newspaper at the head of the table while his wife and son chattered about social climbers and brand optics. I had thought his silence was indifference. Now I realized his silence was not absence. It was supervision. He was not a father watching his family eat dinner. He was a CEO watching his department heads report on a project. And I was the project. "He calls you the baker's daughter," Mara said, rating over my shoulder. Her voice was quiet, laced with disgust. "Like it is a slur. To him it is," I said. "It means I am labor. It means I am disposable." I looked at the emails in the stack. They detailed the entire timeline. Gordon had instructed the lawyers to draft the embezzlement narrative 6 months ago, right after I had secured a major grant for the Civic Studio. He saw my competence not as an asset to the family, but as a threat to his control over Beckett. He needed a daughter-in-law who was decorative and submissive. When he realized I actually read contracts, he decided to liquidate me. "We need to get this to Rory," I said, putting the papers back into the envelope. "This proves malice. It proves the defamation was premeditated by the chairman of the board, not just a heartbroken groom." We met Rory at his office at 7 in the morning. The air in the conference room was stale, smelling of old coffee and toner. Rory looked at the handwritten note with the clinical detachment of a surgeon examining a tumor. "This is the link," Rory said. "We can tie the defamation directly to the corporate entity now. It is not a domestic dispute anymore. It is a conspiracy to commit fraud and damage a third-party vendor. We spent the next 4 hours building the ladder." That was what Rory called it. We laid out every single contract, every non-disclosure agreement, and every vendor writer I had signed or that had been forged in my name. "Look at this," I said, pointing to a document from the forensic retrieval, the catering contract, the venue contract, the floral deposit. They are all under Ashican Event Holdings, but the refund clauses all point back to Rowe Meridian accounts. "He made you take the liability," Rory said, nodding. "But he kept the equity. If the wedding went well, he got the press. If it went bad, you got the bill." "We need to authenticate the handwriting on the note," Rory said. "I need a witness who can swear that this is Gordon Rowe's writing." "Drew," I said. "Drew Mullally sees his handwriting every day on checks." We got Drew on a secure video call. He looked terrible. He was sitting in his car, parked in what looked like a supermarket parking lot. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled low. "They are firing people," Drew said, his voice shaking. "Gordon is on a rampage. He knows someone leaked the pitch deck. He is threatening to blacklist anyone who talks to you." "Drew," Rory said, his voice calm and authoritative, "we do not need you to be a hero. We need you to be a citizen. I am going to issue a subpoena for your testimony. That gives you legal cover. You are not volunteering. You are being compelled by the court. If they fire you for complying with a subpoena, they are committing a federal crime. They do not care about the law." Drew whispered, "You do not know Gordon." "I know bullies," Rory said. "And I know that bullies hate sunlight. We are going to put him under a spotlight so bright he will burn. Will you verify the handwriting?" Drew hesitated. I leaned into the camera frame. "Drew," I said, "you told me they were trying to pin the debt on me if you do not help me stop them. They will do it to the next person. Maybe they will do it to you when you become too expensive." Drew closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. "Send the subpoena," he said. "I will testify. We had our soldier. Now we just needed to survive until the hearing." My phone rang at 2:00 in the afternoon. It was a private number. Rory signaled for me to answer it on speaker. "Hello, sir." Darling, the voice was sweet, viscous, and terrifyingly familiar. It was Evelyn Rowe. She sounded like she was calling to invite me to tea, not calling the woman she had just tried to destroy on national television. "Evelyn," I said, "I think things have gotten a bit out of hand." "Don't you?" she said. "Lawyers, subpoenas, forensic teams, it is all so vulgar." "It is not us." It is exactly you, Evelyn. I said. She laughed, a light tinkling sound. You always were dramatic. Look, Gordon and I have been talking. We want to help you. We know you are hurt. We know you are worried about your little job at the nonprofit. I am on administrative leave, Evelyn, because of you, which is why we want to make it right, she purred. We are prepared to offer you a settlement to help you start over somewhere else, maybe Chicago or New York, far away from all this nasty gossip. She was not offering an apology. She was offering a relocation package for a witness she wanted to disappear. How much? I asked. Rory raised an eyebrow but stayed silent. $200,000. Evelyn said tax-free in cash tonight. All you have to do is sign a statement saying the cancellation was mutual and that you were confused about the financial details. Withdraw the court filing. Take the money and go live your life. $200,000. It was a lot of money, but compared to the 50 million they were trying to secure from the investors, it was a rounding error. It was pocket change. You are scared, I said. You are not scared of losing Beckett. You are scared of losing the funding. The sweetness dropped from her voice instantly. You are a foolish girl, Evelyn hissed. You have nothing. We have everything. If you walk into that courtroom tomorrow, you will leave with nothing but debt. Take the deal. I do not want your money, Evelyn. I said, I want my reputation, and I am going to get it back from you piece by piece. You will regret this, she said. The line went dead. I looked at Rory. They are desperate. They are terrified, Rory corrected. They know the forensic audit is going to find the shell company drafts. They are trying to buy you out before the evidence becomes public record. The day turned into night. We worked for dinner, finalizing the exhibit list. I felt a strange sense of calm. The fear was gone. The heartbreak was gone. All that was left was the cold mechanics of justice. At 9:00, my phone pinged again. A text message. It was from Beckett. I stared at the screen. He had sent an image. It was a photo of 2 wedding rings, my platinum band and his gold one sitting on the bedside table in his loft. The bedside table where we used to sleep. Below the photo, a message. I still have them. We can still do this. I will fix it with Dad. I will fix everything. Just sign the attachment so I can show him you are on our team. We can get married privately next week. I love you. He was dangling the dream. He was dangling the way he had humiliated me to cancel. He thought I was so desperate for his love, so desperate to be a roe that I would crawl back over broken glass just to wear that ring. I opened the attachment. It was titled Reconciliation and Non-Prosecution Agreement. I scanned it. It was a trap. It stated that I would withdraw all legal claims, accept full liability for past administrative errors in the company ledgers, and agree to a strict non-disclosure agreement regarding family business. He was asking me to marry him, and in exchange I had to agree to be his felon. I looked at the photo of the rings. They did not look like symbols of love anymore. They looked like handcuffs. I did not feel the urge to cry. I felt the urge to laugh. It was so pathetic. It was so weak. I typed a reply. See you in court. I hit send. Then I blocked him again. Rory slid a document across the table. This is it. He said the proposed order for tomorrow. I looked at the document. It was titled Permanent Injunction and Declaratory Judgment. It asked for everything. It asked for a permanent ban on them using my name or likeness. It asked for a complete retraction of the press statements. It asked for financial damages. But most importantly, it asked for a constructive trust over the assets of Rho Meridian Gamma, meaning if the court found they had put assets in my name, those assets now legally belong to me to liquidate and donate, stripping them of their hiding place. If we win this, Rory said, we do not just clear your name. We take away their ability to play this game ever again. We cut off the hand that holds the pen. Let's win it, I said. I went back to Mara's apartment, but I did not sleep. I ironed my suit. It was a navy blue Powers suit, sharp and tailored. It was not a dress. It was a uniform. Morning came with a gray steely light. We drove to the courthouse in silence. The streets of Nashville were waking up. People were buying coffee, walking dogs, living lives that were not entangled in corporate warfare. I envied them for a moment, and then I let the envy go. We walked up the courthouse steps. There were reporters this time. The story had blown up enough that the local news vans were parked on the street. MS. Asherton, is it true you embezzled the funds? MS. Asherton, are you suing for alimony? I did not look at them. I kept my eyes on the heavy brass doors. Rory walked a step ahead of me, clearing a path. We entered the courtroom. It was full, not with guests, but with lawyers. The Roe legal team took up 2 tables. They had brought an army, and there, sitting at the defense table, was the family. Gordon Roe sat in the center, looking like a stone statue. Evelyn sat to his right, wearing black, looking like a grieving mother, and Beckett sat on the end. He was wearing a gray suit. He looked up as I walked in. He tried to smile. It was a reflex, a muscle memory of the charm that had worked on me for 4 years. He looked at me with soft, sad eyes, as if trying to telepathically communicate that we were both victims here. I did not smile back. I did not look away. I looked through him. I looked at him as if he were a lying item on a spreadsheet that I was about to delete. I walked to the plaintiff's table and set down my thin black folder. It looked so small compared to their stacks of boxes, but I knew what was inside. All rise. The bailiff's voice boomed, cutting through the murmurs like a knife. The door behind the bench opened. Judge Holloway walked in, her black robe billowing. She did not look tired today. She looked ready. Docket number 472, the clerk announced. Asherton versus Roe. I stood up. Beckett stood up. The room went silent. The air was thin and electric. Counsel, Judge Holloway said, looking at Rory. You may proceed. Rory turned to me and gave a microscopic nod. I took a breath. The stage was set. The lights were on. But this time the script was mine. The courtroom was silent, but it was not the empty silence of a church or the expectant silence of a theater. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a room waiting for a guillotine blade to drop. I stood at the plaintiff's table, my hands resting flat on the cool mahogany across the aisle. The Roe family sat like a portrait of offended dignity. Evelyn was dabbing dry eyes with a handkerchief. Gordon was staring at the wall. Beckett was looking at the judge, wearing an expression of practiced sorrow that I knew he had rehearsed in the mirror that morning. Rory Halstead stood up. He did not pace. He did not raise his voice. He buttoned his jacket with a singular sharp movement and addressed Judge Holloway. Your Honor, Rory began, his voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. We are not asking for justice based on emotion. We are not asking for sympathy for a bride left at the altar. We are asking for justice based on contracts, data, and premeditated malicious intent. He walked to the projector screen. The defense claims Mr. Roe canceled the wedding in a moment of emotional clarity. Rory said, they claim it was a heartbreaking decision made on the spot. If that is true, then we have a chronological impossibility to address. Rory clicked a remote. The screen lit up. It was the metadata from the USB drive, specifically the file titled Narrative Strategy Post-Cancellation. This document, Rory said, pointing to the date stamp, was created 4 days before the wedding. It contains the exact press release that was issued last night. It contains a list of journalists who were sent exclusive tips about my client's alleged embezzlement 3 hours before the ceremony began. The judge leaned forward. She put on her reading glasses. She looked from the screen to Beckett. Mr. Roe, the judge said, her voice deceptively mild, you wrote a press release accusing your fiancé of theft 4 days before you supposedly decided not to marry her. Beckett stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Your Honor, I was conflicted. I was preparing for the worst-case scenario. It was just a draft. I was emotional. Emotional. Rory interrupted. He turned to the bailiff. Play the clip, please. Exhibit C. The video played. It was the raw footage from the live stream, not the edited version online. It showed the moment Beckett announced the cancellation, and then it showed the reaction. Plat, plat, plat. Evelyn Roe standing up. Gordon Roe pumping his fist. The cheers of the groomsmen. Rory paused the video on a freeze frame of Evelyn's ecstatic face. Mr. Roe, Rory said, looking directly at Beckett. If this was a tragedy, why was your family cheering? Why was the reaction instantaneous and synchronized? People do not give a standing ovation for a heartbreak unless it is a performance. Beckett opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The emotional defense had just evaporated. And finally, Rory said, "We have the slip of the tongue." He played the audio of Beckett's whisper. "You think you can keep the shares. You get nothing." "This was never about a marriage," Rory stated. "This was about a merger. And when Mr. Rowe realized he could not force my client to sign a prenuptial agreement that would allow him to transfer toxic debt into her name, he initiated a plan B to destroy her credibility so she could not defend herself against the fraud." Sterling, the Rowe family lawyer, jumped up. "Objection, speculation. There is no proof of any debt transfer." "Actually," Rory said, a small dangerous smile touching his lips, "there is, and this brings us to the witness." The doors opened. Drew Mallory walked in. He looked terrified. He was pale, and he kept his eyes on the floor as he walked to the stand. But when he sat down and swore to tell the truth, he looked at Gordon Rowe. Gordon's eyes were boring into him, a silent threat. Drew took a breath and looked away. "Mr. Mallory," Rory said, "what is your role at Rowe Meridian Labs?" "I am the chief financial officer," Drew said quietly. "Did you recognize the document labeled Meridian Gamma Asset Transfer?" "Yes," Drew said. "I drafted it under the instruction of Gordon and Beckett Rowe." "And what was the purpose of this document?" "To separate the company's liabilities, specifically the lawsuits, from the failed clinical trials and move them into a new subsidiary," Drew said. His voice trembled, but he kept going. The subsidiary was to be placed under the legal ownership of Isser Asheton. A gasp went through the courtroom, not from the gallery, but from the judge herself. "They intended to sell the clean assets to investors," Drew continued, "and leave MS. Asheton with approximately $12 million in debt and legal judgments." Judge Holloway took off her glasses. She looked at the round table. Her face was no longer mild. It was thunderous. "But surely," Sterling stammered, "Mr. Rowe has the right to manage his corporate structure." "Not by framing a third party for fraud," Rory snapped. Rory turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, we have one final piece of evidence. The defense argues that MS. Asheton has no claim because the wedding was cancelled, therefore voiding the marriage contract. However, they forgot about the event contract." Rory pulled out the vendor agreement I had modified. He highlighted Clause 14. "My client, acting as Asheton Event Holdings, included a clause regarding malicious disruption. It states that if the contracting party intentionally uses the event to cause public reputational harm, two things happen. One, the disrupting party assumes full financial liability for all costs. And two, all rights to the media recordings revert to the vendor." Rory looked at Beckett. "Mr. Rowe signed this." He thought he was signing a lighting writer, but he signed a confession. He agreed that if he turned this wedding into a circus to hurt Isser, Isser gets to own the circus. Beckett stared at the document on the screen. He saw his own signature. He saw the clause he had been too arrogant to read because he was too busy looking at himself in the mirror. His face crumbled. It wasn't a sad crumble. It was the structural failure of a man who realizes he has just handed his enemy the weapon that will kill him. Judge Holloway did not need to deliberate. She picked up her pen. She wrote quickly, the scratching sound loud in the silent room. "I have heard enough," she said. She looked at the Rowe family. "The court finds that the plaintiff has established a clear likelihood of success on the merits of her claims for fraud, defamation, and breach of contract. The evidence suggests a coordinated malicious effort to destroy the plaintiff's reputation for financial gain. This is not a family dispute. This is a corporate raid disguised as a wedding." She looked at Beckett. "Mr. Rowe, you wanted to control the story. You have lost that privilege." She read from the order. "I am issuing a permanent injunction. You, your family, and any entities you control are banned from mentioning MS. Asheton in any public forum permanently. You are ordered to retract all press statements immediately." Second, the judge continued, "I am ordering an immediate asset freeze on Rowe Meridian Labs and the appointment of an independent forensic monitor. No money moves out of that company without court approval until we determine exactly how much was siphoned into these shell accounts." And finally she said, Looking at the press gallery, I am declaring that, under the terms of the contract signed by the defendant, all footage and media rights to the event belong to Ms. Ashton. She may release the raw footage to correct the record as she sees fit. She slammed the gavel down. Then the sound was final. It broke the spell. Beckett slumped in his chair. He put his head in his hands. He looked small. The golden boy, the CEO, the visionary, he was gone. All that was left was a man who had tried to play God and found out he was just a defendant. This is absurd. Evelyn Rose shrieked. She stood up, her face twisted in ugly red rage. You cannot do this. We are the victims. She is a thief. She is a nobody. Sit down, Evelyn. Gordon wrought. He grabbed her arm and yanked her back into the chair. Shut up. You are making it worse. Don't you touch me. Evelyn screamed back, slapping his hand away. This was your plan. You said she was weak. You said she wouldn't fight. They were screaming at each other. The perfect family, the dynasty. They were tearing each other apart right there in the courtroom while the court reporter typed every single word. I watched them. I felt no joy. I felt no anger. I just felt light. The weight of the last 4 years, the weight of trying to be good enough for people who were rotten to the core was gone. Court is adjourned, the judge said, signaling the beefed to clear the room. Rory closed his folder. He looked at me and smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had seen all week. It is over, he said. Yes, I said. It is. I picked up my purse. I did not look at Beckett as I walked past their table. He did not look up. He was staring at his hands, watching his empire dissolve. I walked down the center aisle. The heavy door swung open, and I stepped out into the hallway. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, blinding sunlight of the Nashville afternoon. The air smelled of exhaust and honeysuckle. I walked down the street, past the coffee shops, past the tourists. I found myself walking toward the venue. The theater was dark now. The marquee was blank. The trucks were gone. I stopped at the corner. In my hand, I was still holding a single white rose I had unconsciously plucked from a vase in the witness waiting room. It was beginning to wilt. I looked at the building, where 24 hours ago I had been humiliated in front of the world. They had tried to bury me. They had forgotten that I was a seed. I walked to the trash can on the corner. I dropped the white rose inside. I did not look back. I turned the corner and walked toward the parking garage where Rory was waiting. I had a company to dissolve. I had a reputation to rebuild. And for the first time in a long time, the story was entirely mine to write. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Isser and her fight for justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please drop a comment below and let me know your country or city, and share what you would have done in Isser's shoes. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please make sure to subscribe to Azad Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this story reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.